Hey folks, Prof Psych here. Okay, a bit of a video today on observations or observational techniques as non-experimental ways of gathering data. In other words, we don't need to do an experiment to be able to conduct an observation. Obvious question for you folks, really obvious question. What is an observation? Well, that can be straightforward, can't it? It's observing in some way, whether through a camera, through a one-way mirror, through our naked eyes. It's observing human behaviour in the field of psychology. Let's ask some tougher questions then. What about these types of observation? What about a natural observation? Controlled observation, participant, non-participant, covert, overt. By the way, as I go through these, good idea to pause the video, as I always say, make some notes, all right? Particularly if you're doing this for studying for some sort of qualification. So let's have a look at these. A natural observation, a bit like a natural experiment, takes place in a real world setting where we don't manipulate anything. We just allow the behaviour that would already be there to go ahead and we observe it. Okay, let's take two examples. Behaviour at the beach, at the seaside. People are already there, we're just observing behaviours. We might break down what we're looking at, but certain things. A music festival, fantastic place to do a natural observation, possibly because we're interested in something like the effects of de-individuation. Do people behave differently in large crowds, for example? But we haven't changed anything. Those are both examples of natural settings, okay? A controlled observation is where we are going to control what takes place. Now, let's take something like the classroom. So we're using a classroom, but now we are controlling. We might have manipulated the furniture, put it out in a certain way, might have controlled who is entering the classroom and how, okay? We might control the number of people involved in that situation, and so that we can therefore observe it. Similarly, we could use, couldn't we, a lecture theatre somewhere like a university. All right? So naturally occurring, we don't change anything. Controlled observation, we have an element or degree of control, maybe a very high level of control over exactly what happens in that situation. Okay, then we've got the idea of participant and non-participant observation or observers, okay? In the participant observation, the observer is part of that social situation. Now, by its truest definition, of course, they will be one of the participants in that social situation. If we look at this photo here, here is some football club, okay, a football training session, something like that, okay? And you can see that the observer may well be one of the players, therefore, one of the participants who's taking part there in football, but who is also observing the other performers. Equally, it could extend to a different role. For example, the football coach here is present, is taking part in the social situation, and could also be an observer, okay? In a non-participant observation, and here, the top picture, we have Mary Ainsworth. You will probably know from attachment studies, the strange situation. Now, Ainsworth set up a situation, bit of revision of attachment if you're studying that. Ainsworth set up a situation with an infant and with a mother and a stranger with different stages, very closely timed and controlled, and the stranger would come and go, the mother would come and go, and so on. But the important thing, as a non-participant, the observations were done by Ainsworth from not taking part in the situation. She was not a participant in the situation, okay? She didn't influence it, she wasn't involved, wasn't participating in that situation. Okay, then we get the idea of overt and covert, and you might see some overlap now, and we'll come back to that in a second. An overt observation, just like this picture here, we absolutely know that the observer is present or that we're being observed. For example, if we can see someone standing with a clipboard who's making notes, We know we're being observed. We've probably even been told before that here is somebody who is an observer, and everybody is aware of that. In a covert observation, number of ways of doing this, of course. We might be a participant observer, but others don't know that that participant observer is doing an observation. Or it might be through something like hidden cameras, a mirror system, or a sort of where one-way mirror, where is it a one-way or two-way? But where people don't know that they're being observed through a window. Okay, so overt, we know we're being observed. Covert, we don't. Okay. All right. Now let's take a situation where these things overlap. Here's a fascinating behaviour. Here is the behaviour of hooliganism, football hooligans. Okay. Make no mistake, across many parts of the world, hooliganism is a very organised set of behaviours. It's not a completely random thing. So how do we get to understand that? How do we know more about it and understand the psychology involved in taking part in hooliganism? Okay, so now let's look at a crossover then. What we may have here is a natural observation. We're not going to manipulate anything. This is a natural, real world behaviour, occurrence, okay? But let's say, for example, I am going to become a participant and covert observer. So I now am going to take part in that social situation covertly. In other words, I am pretending to be a football hooligan. This has been done by some journalists, by the way, who have lived as, if you like, undercover hooligans, recording with secret cameras behaviours and trying to understand the organisation behind something like hooligan behaviour. Okay, so it's covert because the real hooligans don't know that it's happening. It's participant because I would be taking part as a hooligan in the situation, and it's natural because it's an entirely naturally happening event anyway. All right, because let's think about it. How else do we study something like that? Possibly without doing it that way, we wouldn't get access to it. We wouldn't be permitted. They wouldn't allow us. Okay? All right. Now we look at the idea then, folks, of some sampling procedures, split into two main types here. Okay? The first is event sampling. With event sampling, what we're doing is we're defining a particular behaviour. Okay? And we will record, regardless of how often, we will record the number of times that particular behaviour or event occurs. Okay? Let's have a look at a situation with this. All right? I'm interested in, for example, there's a new menu at school, and I'm interested in whether that has influenced children's behaviour and their levels of aggression in the playground. Okay? So now I'm going to define what behaviours would constitute aggression, and in event sampling, we would record every time one of those events, behaviours happens. For example, a child pushing another one, a child hitting another one. Okay? So long as we define those behaviours, those events. Time sampling, on the other hand, is different. Time sampling is having set intervals where we are going to record the behaviours that we see at that interval. We don't define the behaviours before. For example, every 30 seconds or every minute. So every 30 seconds, the observer notes what behaviour is happening now. Now it could be, let's go back to our playground situation, it could be a push or a shove. It could be a cuddle or a kiss or a smile. Okay? So we look at that in time intervals, time sampling. Okay, now folks, let's look at the importance here of coding systems. Coding systems are critical now. A coding system is a way of categorizing behavior so that we can record it in an observation. Let's go back to our example. We're interested in children's behavior in the playground. Okay? We're interested in whether children are aggressive, for example. All right? Now, here we would create a coding system so that we break down aggression, we break down that type of behavior into specific behaviors. A push, a shove, verbal aggression, whatever it might be. We code the behavior so that we have a chance of recording it by its very definition. Okay? All right. Let's have a look at some real life examples of coding systems. This is an interesting one, the Marital interaction coding system. This is a coding system to look at, and it predefines behaviors, both verbal and non-verbal behaviors in couples that are married couples that are needing support in their marriage. So it looks at the behaviors and categorizes them, codes them between the married couple in terms of their interactions with each other. Let's take an example of another one, the facial action coding system. Facial coding action system. Now you can see here, this published coding system breaks facial expressions right down into 64 different types of facial movement, all of which can be interpreted for what those expressions, what those exact things our face is doing means. There are simple ones, aren't there? Eyes up. Okay? Lip pucker. And so on. So we can interpret and analyze what we think of those. So a coding system helps break down behaviors into smaller behaviors, smaller units if you like, so we can identify and record them more simply, maybe more reliably in an observation. Okay folks, remember as I said before, pause this video, go back through it, pause it, make some notes. What is a natural observation? What's a participant observation? Have you got an example of that? Okay, use that, go back through the video, keep playing it. Okay folks, don't forget to follow me, Prof Psych, on Instagram. All right, more videos to come.